Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's podcast. Today, we're going to talk about how ordinary men in 1940s became Nazis and the monsters that they were. So, before we get onto that topic, Jamie, we will shed a bit of light into Nazism, and then
Right.
we'll go forward.
Right.
So, what is Nazism, Jamie?
So, Nazism is a nickname for what's called in Germany National Socialists or Nationalsozialistiker, and this was a popularist movement that began in the 1920s in Germany post First World War, and everyone in the Western world knows what Nazism is and what it represents. However, it's important to connect to our global audience and shed light on what actually happened in Germany. And like Ujjwal was saying, and like we've titled this, how ordinary men chose to do awful stuff. And we can't conceptualize it, but it did happen. And it's kind of a tough reality that we have to focus on. Anyway, so Nazism is a belief that the German Empire will rule for 1,000 years. This idea was instigated by Adolf Hitler. He believed in an Aryan super race, which eventually led to the Second World War, and he started a war on both fronts of against Russia and France, and he died for his fascist movement, and his fascist movement ended with the destruction of Europe and him shooting himself in the head. So it was a nightmare, really, of an idea, but nonetheless, we're studying it, and yeah.
There was a bit of fascist movement in Britain as well around that time.
Yeah.
How did it not get any traction? Because it did get a bit of highlight at some point, but then it died out pretty quickly.
So that was Oswald Mosley.
Yeah.
You probably have seen him on Peaky Blinders.
Yes.
Have you seen Peaky Blinders? Yeah. Great TV show, by the way.
Definitely.
Yeah. Anyway, he started the British Nationalist Party, I believe, in the 1930s. And in 1936, he did his March of London, or March on London, and consequently, he got stuff chucked at him from the rooftops all around London, and they disbanded the march completely, and everyone went home. It was a completely different story in Germany because they were in such a desperate state.
Yeah.
So Hitler came along with promises. He said, "We're going to give you jobs. We're going to give you everything you've ever wanted." But he said, "My condition is that we eradicate the Jewish race."
Yeah.
That was his condition. And people weren't fussed because if you weren't a Jew, then it wasn't your problem.
Yeah. And at the time, given all the destruction and the economic downward that happened during World War I, I think that kind of promise might have looked sound very like sound idea to some people, if you're not Jewish, that is.
Right, yeah.
And
to the majority, that's what it was. It was a rule of, it was a mob, basically. It was, that's what fascism is. It started in Italy with Mussolini, and it spread to Germany.
Yeah, but how did because fascism and Nazism is not exactly the same thing, is it? So how did Nazism began?
Right.
Do you know any stories? Are there any stories behind it? Or
I'll tell you what. This sort of links into our ordinary men concept. But some historians believe that Nazism is not where these extremist German superior ideas started. It was actually with something called the Sonderweg, which means the superior group. I don't know if that's a direct translation. I don't speak German, but the Sonderweg is often used by what we call functionalists. So these are people that say that the Nazis were not just following Hitler, they were doing this of their own accord.
Okay.
And
some also say that Hitler was inspired by Nietzsche, which gives a kind of disrespect towards Nietzsche, by the way, because later on it came out that it was his sister who was intentionally publishing the books in a way that that was very familiar to Nazi ideology and all that. But then Nietzsche does talk about Übermensch.
Right.
There is no literal translation of Übermensch in English. You can call it a Superman. That would have been like a good translation, but then by Superman everyone thinks, oh, it's a guy who goes like this with a cape and S on in his chest, but it's basically saying like a bit evolved man or something like that. And some people try to bring make a bridge between the Nazism and the Übermenschheit idea of Nietzsche.
There may be a link there, because I've also heard the same arguments made about Kant, and they say that existed in Nazi Germany, and you can kind of see why, because 19th century Europe so much changed. These are not. It's not like this leader came from space. He's not an alien. He was born and raised in that culture, and I believe what I read was that the Nazis they were really intelligent, so they were really well informed on people like Immanuel Kant, and really well informed on Nietzsche, which makes it all the more devastating because they had their own, effed up logic of why they were doing stuff.
Well, earlier when we were talking about this, you were talking about how they started in beer band or something like that. Yeah. What is it about?
Yeah. So we're gonna get onto the main attraction, which is our book right here, and they talk about it in this book. Also, a book called Edward Westermann's Drunk on Genocide, and it's saying that the alcoholism was an integral part of the Nazi philosophy, and I don't know if I agree with that, but there are definitely a lot of uses of alcohol to cope with the awful things that happened in the Holocaust. Yeah,
definitely. Like later on when we go to talk about the things that happened, alcohol seems to have played quite a big significant part on it. Not to say that alcohol made them do what they did, but alcohol helped them kind of forget what they did, basically.
It was do they call it an inhibitor or a de-inhibitor? Yeah. Desensitized them, you could say. Yeah. And that's what Hitler played on, actually. And that's what we were relating back to your question you asked me.
Yeah.
So it was the beer halls in the 1920s. There were, drunk Germans sitting around, quite a few unemployed. And Hitler stands up and he says, right, we're going to do this, that and the other. And he gets a big cheer. And he uses that big cheer to self-perpetuate popular ideas.
Thank you for for talking about the backstory and the ideas of Nazism. So you did your thesis on history. I mean, your degree on history. And you chose this particular part of World War II to do your thesis on. I'm really interested what inspired you.
Okay, it's a bit... I don't think there's one moment that I thought, oh, I know, I'm going to do it on this. Because actually, my other thought was Soviet history. Oh, okay. I was attracted to Soviet history as much as I was attracted to German history. I wish I chose Soviet, actually, because German history is so complicated. And any idea you think you have that's new, there's probably a historian who's already said it. But I just wanted to dig deeper into it, actually, especially in this day and age when things get overly politicized about identities and about, gender. And I was thinking, well, I'm a young man and I can relate to other young men. So, I was trying to pick apart, how could they have done that? If they could have been just like me, how could they have done that? And, and at times it's like, you feel sick of it. But when I was reading it, at times I got sick of it. I thought, this is I wish I didn't choose this. But I think psychology has always fascinated me, so I really just wanted to break it down, I suppose. Yep. Yeah.
Well, after we decided to do a podcast on this topic, I went on to listen the book Ordinary Men because I couldn't find the written book, basically. And the first 1 hour of it was brutal. And the second hour of it was torture.
Right.
Basically, if you can visualize the things that are being said in the book, there is no movie, there is no TV show that exists out there that can depict the pictures like as it has been depicted in that book, like the way it has been laid down. And it was really tough read, and I wonder how did you do that? And you had to read 23 books or something in order to write this thesis.
I read a lot about this stuff. I guess I was following behavioral patterns. So if I've sufficiently covered one behavioral pattern, I'll move on. I don't need to read 50 pages on rape and stuff like that. I'll just move on. If I got one quote that supports this behavioral aspect, then that's enough for me.
Well, I'm
Yeah.
glad you chose to do this because we are talking about it, and I think it's important for people to learn about it and see how basically normal people, the
Right.
Nazis, they were normal people,
Right.
and how they could do the atrocities that they did. And I think we should learn about it so that we can see the symptoms of those things when it happens
Yeah.
in future, or even in present situation. There are many countries around the world where we see this this movement, which is not particularly leaning towards the movement which is beneficial for people. It is beneficial for some people, but not for everybody. And the politicians, they are misunderstanding this, thinking this is what people want.
Right.
Like, I don't want to give particular example of any democracy, but if you go and look into like these recent elections that have happened and the statements given by the politicians in those elections, they try to mimic the statement that is talked by the people who are in the extremes of right wing or the left wing.
Right. So
Not there, and they think because those people's voice is louder, and because those people say things that are very clickbaity and that are very like that goes viral in social media, politicians think that it is what everybody wants, and they try to mimic that as well, which is very bizarre.
Linking politics into fascism is weird in this day and age because lots of people get listed as a Nazi.
Yeah.
And I think if there was a Nazi politician, you would see them a mile away.
Yeah.
So I think it's the conviction that matters. If someone wants to play into those groups, I don't think that's okay, but I don't think they're doing any real damage until the people come along and say, right, we want this radicalization.
Yeah, we definitely will see symptoms of those things arising in people because it is a people behavior, and if ordinary men back in the days were capable of doing it, I kind of believe that people in the future will also be capable of doing it, and also the people that we are among us, like we don't know what deep down what a person actually believes in.
Yeah.
Because these days it's so hard to wear a mask.
Well, the thing is, this book, it was like the first one I sent you in the direction of. I chose it specifically because it is about people, and we like to talk about people. And this, I'll give them a bit of context for anyone that's not read it, but Ordinary Men by Christopher Browning is a book, a study into a police battalion 101 of what's known as the Holocaust by bullets. So even though 6 million Jews died in the Holocaust, 2 million of them were shot into mass graves. And in this book, Ordinary Men, a lot of the people who were doing these things were not inferiors, but subordinates to the SS, the military police. And they were 40 years old, 45, 50 years old, people older than Hitler, people older than fascism itself, and they were doing horrendous things. And that's why I think Browning chose these people specifically, because it shows you that they were not Nazis. And he wants to really emphasize that, because other historians like Daniel Goldhagen says everything Nazi happened from evil people. But, Browning asks, what are evil people, if not just people who are doing things for maybe selfish reasons, or reasons that they don't understand, or cowardice, or incompetence, or fear of their superiors. I was saying this to Ujwal earlier. You can imagine at your job getting intimidated by your superiors, but imagine if your superior is an SS officer.
Exactly.
That's horrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I got into kind of similar conclusion. It's like by reading the book and analyzing it, I realized that soldiers in SS and the Wehrmacht, they were not necessarily following the orders. They were willingly killing the Jews and killing them in the most atrocious way that is possible. And so, like you said, the competence comes there, fear of superior comes there. Is there any other reason that you think was also making them do that? Because not all of some of them were definitely following orders, but not all of them.
Yeah. So I don't think anyone did it for chaotic reason, and I think if they did, maybe that would be like on an occasion.
Yeah, some psychopaths.
Yeah,
definitely.
Exactly. Yeah, and I do believe personally that what made Nazi structure was that the psychopaths could rise to the tops. If you look at the most successful doctor, Josef Mengele, he was an absolute maniac. He did experiments with no moral ethics. So these horrible people would have rose to the top, definitely. But for the people who weren't following typical rules, I think they were doing it to protect their family or pride of their country for reasons you could probably sympathize with, but at the same time, you know.
So basically, the propaganda was saying that they are going to take over your family, and we need to get rid of them. They have all the wealth, and they are taking over the institutions.
So it was indoctrination to an extent, which you could argue is still following the rules.
Yeah,
because the rules are Nazi propaganda.
Yeah, but they were not necessarily like saying like the dogs following the master.
Right.
It was not necessarily that.
Yeah.
It was they were independent. So later on we'll go into those topics as well. But like while reading this book, I heard of some instances where basically the police, the Wehrmacht police, they were given the opportunity. They had the chance to say no and get away from killings. They had that, but most of them they did not do that. Some of them they did, but not all of them.
Yeah.
And the ones who did, they were counted as someone who is lesser of a human, who is lesser of a man.
Right.
So there was a bit of masculinity involved as well.
Definitely. It was that comradeship of showing yourself to be weak. Germany was always and has always been considered the fatherland. You know, some countries are considered the motherland. Germany has always been a patriarchal country. And there was a lot of that, and there was a lot of berating of different men. And the tragic part is that not every German soldier was a Nazi. There were men who were, you know, they were, I don't know what the right word to use is, maybe noble, you could say.
Well, I mean, they genuinely thought they were fighting for a good cause, even though they did not know the extent of the cause.
I mean, you can look at the divisions between the Luftwaffe and the SS. So the Luftwaffe insisted on using the typical salute, and they wore their Iron Cross with pride. And they put the Iron Cross higher than the swastika, but they never vocalized that. Whereas obviously the SS were where the more erratic men lived. You know, these are the men who are clearly unstable, do not have good relationships with their family or their wife or anyone, and they were the ones who did the most horrendous things. Yeah, it's like
there was a movie that recently came. I forgot the name of the movie. I think. Basically, it shows how it's a story of the man who was in charge of Auschwitz, and he literally moves his family next to the Auschwitz camp.
Oh, that's actually a fictional story. I found it.
Is it not real?
I thought it was real.
Oh, okay.
I found out later.
Okay.
It's really popular in the UK. It's called The Boy in Striped Pyjamas.
Yeah, that one. And the other one was the recent one. The Boy in Striped Pyjamas is the fictional, but there is other story which recently came. It's in Netflix, I believe. Okay. And basically, it shows the guy who was in charge of Auschwitz or any concentration camp. He moves his family next to the concentration camp, and they never go inside the concentration camp in the movies. They only show about how his family lived and how was the situation. But in the background, you can hear the screams, you can hear you can see the smoke, you can see the gunshots, you can see everything, and then still they live their life as if it was normal. It was not abnormal for them. And the guy is trying to climb up the ladder of going into higher position. He's worried about he might be he's worried like he might not get those opportunities, all those things, and it just shows how basically fucked up the situation was at the time. Like everyone likes to say, oh, they were very functional, like everything was streamlined, like they put everything in order, they were orderly they did killings orderly and all that. It was not orderly. It looked orderly from outside, but like literally each and everything,
I get what you're saying. Actually, this has reminded me, I read a book recently which is also popular in the UK called The Tattooist of Auschwitz, and it's a man who managed to survive Auschwitz, and he did a lot of bribery. There were the dodgy people obviously did dodgy behaviours, so these guards would take bribes, they would take diamonds from dead people and things like that, sell things on the black market. And I don't think it was a pleasant environment, the camps, for anyone, including the people who worked there. And relating this back to the ordinary men and the battalion we were talking about, the man who instigated this is infamous Heinrich Himmler. who constructed the whole systemization of murder. And what was I saying? He was sick at the sight of seeing the battalion. He was. People said he went green in the face at looking at the dead bodies. Yet he was the man that did horrific things.
Yeah, it wasn't that. Isn't that the biggest hypocrisy of it all?
Yeah.
Like, he was the one who orchestrated all of it, and like most of it, and then he was sick of seeing the outcome of what he has done.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then also Slavoj Žižek famously saying that he used to carry Bhagavad Gita in his Himmler used to carry Bhagavad Gita in his hand, and just to say that my actions are away from my body, they are away from my soul. So my soul is not responsible for my action. It's like, come on, like,
it's deep stuff. I'll tell you what, it's not easy things to contemplate. Definitely.
We haven't seen that kind of atrocities happening to people before that.
Yeah.
It might have happened, but we haven't seen it happen.
It's
when people talk about Mongol invasion and they try to say, oh, was that they killed more people than people died in World War II.
Yeah.
But it does not. The Mongol invasion does not come from the same. They did not have same motivation that the Nazis had. It was not racially motivated.
Yeah. I think it relates back to our war podcast.
Yeah.
And that the tribal ancient warfare and cultures have died out, and they've been replaced by a self-aware culture. So this self-awareness also extended to the Soviet Union and the idea of communism. People were saying, right, humans have this tendency to be greedy, so everyone's going to earn the same amount of money.
Yeah.
That was communism. Nazis said humans have an evolutionary ladder, and some humans are on the bottom of that ladder. And that was their philosophy. So, and I think those reflective ideas really contributed to brutal actions, including the Taiping Rebellion in China and what happened with Japan in China, and obviously Russia's invasion of Europe, and all of that awful stuff. And I think it's to do with this new age of warfare. Where like people are banded together behind ideology rather than the tribe. That's it. That's what I'm getting at. It's the idea, because the idea is bigger than the person. Whereas a king, ancient king, he couldn't be evil, because if he was evil, his like guards would kill him or something like that. But if your idea is bigger than yourself, there's no point anyone killing the leader.
Your idea still survives.
Yeah,
and still we can see the neo-Nazism and all those things, like even in America and in other countries, we see the remnants of it is still going on. Like famously, there are people in India in the political spectrum who say that the RSS, who is one of the groups in India, was kind of inspired by Nazism. And when you look at there was this few documents going around that I looked at, which was basically the beliefs of Nazis and beliefs of RSS, and you could see the similarities in there. So it's like saying, okay, Hindus are the supreme beings, and they deserve to live in India, and like they need to get rid of the other ones. And
well,
it's a sad time.
It's kind of the essence of fascism, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's what separates the right wing from the left wing.
Yeah.
So the extreme leftists say we're all equal. The extreme rightists say nobody's equal.
Nobody's equal. Yeah.
But I guess the reality is we're somewhere in between.
Like I don't like the extremes of either the left wing or the right wing, because both of them are. They will be the reason for the destruction of humanity.
Do you think it's selfishness, the extremes?
Yes, it is. It is saying that I believe in this thought with so much conviction that I want to implement it, and everybody around me needs to believe in it as well.
Yeah. But then again, everyone around you probably do believe it, and you never meet the people who disagree because they don't live in your country.
Exactly. And even if they live in your country, you're not going to listen to them because you are already
they're crazy.
You're already bigger than them. Yeah. Like if you have that kind of fascist Nazi belief in you, that means you believe you yourself as a higher human being than the other ones.
This reminds me of a man called Martin Niemöller, who was a priest in Munich, and he was considered crazy. But he was never attacked because he was so well respected by the population. But the Nazis, I think they got rid of him eventually. But he, that's kind of one of the beautiful aspects, were the Christians who stayed Christian in Germany, just sort of relating that to religion there a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, we like to touch on religion quite a bit in this podcast.
Yeah.
I mean, talking about the people adopting more extreme position, I recently learned about something called purity spiral, the phenomena of purity spiral.
I don't know this.
So basically, purity spiral is where people in groups adopt more and more extreme position to signal their alliance to the group. That's why we see many of these revolutionary groups turning more and more extreme as the time goes, until there is another revolution within or outside the bounds of the group. This peaking extremism ends until it commits horrendous crimes against humanity, or it is somehow stopped by the external forces. So all the atrocities committed by political, racial, ethnic legions is not only because of the original doctrine or the propaganda, the first idea or the original idea, but also that tendency within humans to have and act on extreme ideas just to please people around them.
Wow.
This is what the guy who said that Nazis were just following the orders gets it wrong. He doesn't take into the account that he doesn't take this into account, that people, they will do extreme things in a group just to please the people around them, not necessarily to follow.
Don't you think that could mean they are dogs in some sense? So they are the followers.
Not really. They have more freedom than the dogs have. Like in this sense, dogs. By dogs, what I mean is like not people, but basically like those who are literally following the orders. And the others, like the people in the extreme groups, are those who are not following the orders. They are doing more than following of the order.
Wow,
and
so
being
they're doing
more extreme.
Overwork.
Yeah,
they're overworking.
Well, I mean,
to please their
not necessarily overwork. I wouldn't say it overworking, because it makes them sound like hardworking people. But it's not necessarily that. Okay. It's just that they're trying to come up with more and more extreme ideas in order to please the extreme idea they already have.
Right.
So that is what
for self-promotion, do you think, maybe?
Yeah, self-promotion and to be the leader in the group,
right?
And there will obviously be someone, to be accepted in the group, and we see that all the time. Like whenever you do like a normal group project as well, we see like some of us, like not to link it directly to the Nazism or something like that, but you will see people in political parties and in various groups when there will be people who will do everything to please the leader of the party, like and everything to please the prime minister or something like that, just so that they can get certain gains from them. And I have seen that in political movements in my country as well. Like there would be people it doesn't matter which party they are from, there will be other people who might not even believe in that party or even in that ideology, but they will say, yes, you are perfectly right, you are correct, so that they think later on they will get some benefit from it.
I'll tell you what, Trump's followers scare the hell out of me. Do you know what? Since the attempted assassination, his followers have become so erratic, and they're like praising him like as God status.
Oh,
and you know what? If Trump was a humble man, he would say, "It's not about me. Calm down." But he doesn't. He just sits there and he sort of smiles. And that's worrying, because he's getting some sort of satisfaction from the praise.
Yeah, I saw somewhere saying that he's a God sent or something like that. And there are people in the right who are kind of propagating this idea. Like, there are a few people who believe that some of the leaders are sent by God. Famously, there are some journalists who believe that, but I don't know if they deeply believe it or if they are just trying to propagate the idea of Christianity or something like that. But you do see that, and there were many headlines coming out saying, "Okay, he's a God sent," something like that. And the similar thing happened in India as well, though. So basically, in India, Narendra Modi, before the election, he was saying, this is the responsibility given by God that I need to take.
Wow.
So I need to do it because this is...
That's dangerous.
Yeah, I was sent here to do this by God. And then people realize, do you think we're stupid?
Yeah.
But that's one of the reasons why BJP party itself did not get majority. It's like they were trying to prove themselves that they're bigger than even...
Do you think that's a way to make people submit? Do you think that's what it is? Like, it's their conviction so strong they could be God, basically. I
think leaders who do that, they do believe in it. And there might be some people who will be willing to submit to that. But I think majority of people, especially at this day and age, I think they are educated enough and they have the capacity still to have critical thinking. Hopefully that is not being desensitized by all the 30 seconds videos that we watch. I think those people who are still capable of doing those deep thinking, critical analysis, and have a normal conversation with people who have opposing opinions, I think they don't specifically believe on those kind of things, or they will submit to those kind of calls, basically. Because it's stupid to say that. It's stupid to say that, like saying, okay, I'm sent by gods. Like, I'm sent by gods, I'm here. It's like saying, okay, there is no one higher than me. You won't get anyone purer than me. You won't get anyone better than me. But when you look into their details, like, look into the history of Donald Trump. See, I'm not from America, yeah? And whoever wins election in that country doesn't really impact our life. Like, not unless there is a war or something, it doesn't really impact our life. So it's not something that we deeply, deeply have to be concerned with. But we do need to talk about it, because people... these days we are more of the population of the planet Earth rather than people of a country. We're responsible for this planet. We're responsible for the humanity itself. And when it comes to talk about educating people or even learning about more stuff, I think it's important for us to talk about those kind of things.
We should be learning a lot more, I think.
Yes.
Because we don't have a choice. Like 19th, 20th century Europe and the world, they could basically do whatever they wanted. They had it all they had it all ready for them. But, the mutually assured destruction means that war is not an option.
Exactly. It's like, if there is a war, the both sides are... And we have seen that. We have seen that in Ukraine. We saw that in Gaza, sadly, as well. And, like, the tension going on in Middle East, which is very, very concerning. And people, we are not very worried about things around us. And see, there is a bit of comfort that we get when we don't have to think about all the other stuff. Right. Because... at the end of the day, I might not be the victim of whatever happens around the world, because you, I, and many other people who might be listening to us, they live in reasonably safe countries around the world. Yeah, so we don't have to worry about a bomb falling on in the building that we're sleeping in the night and those kind of things. Yeah. But then those people who are already in that situation, their voice is not being heard because they don't have means. To make their voices heard. One thing. The other thing is, like, if we are in this safe situation and if we don't talk about the people who are being oppressed now, who is going to talk about when we are being oppressed? It's
and I guess this links back to selfishness as well. Like,
well, now going back to the ordinary men, we talk about the Nazis and the Nazi police, the Wehrmacht police. Am I correct in saying Wehrmacht police, or was it?
Wehrmacht were the army. The police were
the SS battalion.
The SS were the widespread police. I believe led by Goering. Okay. Yeah, I believe led by Goering. Okay. And then also under that you had the Gestapo, who were like the door-to-door police. These were the secret investigators. And then you also had the battalions, which I believe were a mixture between the Wehrmacht and the SS. So the SS were telling the Wehrmacht what to do. And that's what happened with the Einsatzgruppen, who were the death by the bullets.
Were they all Germans?
No, actually. And what you were talking about earlier with the idea of appealing to someone, what do you call it? Purity
spiral.
Yeah, purity spiral happened in these countries, Romania and Ukraine, and this has been a big reason as to why people side with Browning's ordinary men and not Hitler's willing executioners by Goldhagen, because people who were not even German were taking SS instructions to do horrific things. So it's a real human crisis. It's not a crisis of ideas, it's a crisis of people. People can do awful things, and we should be mindful that can happen to anyone around you,
And we see that with psychopaths all the time. They might not have means to bring the destruction to the whole nation or to the whole continent, but we do see that. And that's the sad part of it. So the people, basically the police that you explained just now, who are working in concentration camps and who are also responsible for gathering all the Jews and then putting them in the trains and then sending them to wherever the location they were sending them to. When they were hired, do you think they were told the nature of their job? What they would be doing?
I think they were definitely told. One of the few times we actually learn about this written down is a transcript from Himmler towards the end of the war, because a lot of the special operations were vocalized and they were not given instructions written down. However, they what's odd is that they took a lot of pictures and they took a lot of people's possessions and collected them and counted them. So it is strange that they were proud of their method, but they weren't going to be caught doing it, you know? And when the war began to end, they burned most of their concentration camps, which led to people like David Irving from the UK in the 1990s claim the Holocaust never even happened. Yeah.
Yeah, and we still have Holocaust deniers around the world, which is a sad... it's like... I don't know how those people get by along with day-to-day, like, lives and all that. Like,
I think they're
how
just bloody
ignorant...
stupid. You know, I actually... This is a bit like of a side thing, tangent. One of my lecturers at the... I don't know how much I can say this, actually. One of my lecturers was a journalist and a historian. Obviously, she taught me history and she taught other people history. She started going on a rant about journalists can say whatever they want, basically. And I was saying...
Well, like, so journalists have more freedom of expression than the others? Is what she believes in?
Well, she was saying it's okay for journalists to say bad things. It's okay for historians to say bad things. And I said, no, not really, because if a historian says bad things, like the Holocaust didn't happen, he's obviously an idiot.
Yeah,
you know?
And the people who later on, when they read the things left up by that the historian who's not exactly a historian, if they're saying the wrong things about it, then they're going to misunderstand and misinterpret it.
But the thing is, she was saying it's okay because it's all like literature. So if a historian says a bad thing, it's okay, and if a journalist says a bad thing, it's okay. It's like, not really, because a journalist controls the news. You know.
Well, does he not understand historians and fiction writers are different people?
You know what? I had like a brief 2-minute like point that I wanted to make. I pointed her out a bit, which maybe made her feel a bit stupid.
Well,
but,
I mean, if you have that kind of stupid belief in you, and then you deserve to be
basically,
stupid.
if historians get it wrong, nobody actually cares because we judge their credibility. But you can't judge a journalist's credibility. This is a bit irrelevant, but it's difficult to judge a journalist's credibility compared to judging a historian's credibility, because people know what happened in history and they can find out. But if people didn't know about the news, you can't just tell them new things that don't exist. You know?
Like how, you time and again, you get a viral news from North Korea coming in.
Right.
And it's some of the news agencies in Washington or somewhere around the world who publish that news saying, I think there was a news going on about like Kim Jong-un being so fat that he had a heart attack and all those things.
Right.
And like, which was not... that's not a true news. That did not come out of North Korea, and people like believe in it and all.
But anyway, I'm worried about bad journalists more than bad historians. I don't actually care about bad historians, because if they say that this didn't happen, they're obviously morons.
Yeah, you know? And we can find the evidence of that actually happening
they're
from others.
Obviously silly.
But why don't you like the journalist saying the wrong things?
Because there's no alternative source of information. You know, if it happened an hour ago and there's only one popular news site, it's difficult to find other news sites that have this information yet. Yeah. You know? It's
like how when the riots started happening a few weeks ago in UK, there were some news outlets initially who said that, oh, this guy is an immigrant. He's Muslim, an immigrant from another country. But then later on it turned out, no, he was born in this country. Yeah. He's Muslim, but he was born in this country. But that fake news became widespread, and every time BBC or the news outlet had to address that, they were saying, okay, this was incited by fake news.
Yeah.
And that
but they can never admit they got it wrong. That's what really annoys me. Like, BBC cannot admit they did something wrong.
Well, it was not the BBC, I think, in this situation who did the wrong, but
sorry, BBC. But anyway, no news source is 100% credible, and I guess no piece of writing is. But anyway. Yeah, we will always see biases because we're human beings and we have biases. Right. But that's not the way to justify it. Yeah. The biases should not be justifying it. If we relate this back to maybe propaganda and censorship, the Nazis, they were fully aware of what they were doing. I don't think it's the same in Western democracies. I don't think they're aware that they're... Some people like to make conspiracies saying that, we're being controlled by a new age of fascism or a new age of something. But I think it's just... like clickbait and stuff like that happens. And also calling people like, other people like, oh, you are like Hitler, you are like this, you are like that. It kind of like takes like, it kind of makes Hitler sound like he was not even that bad of a person. Like, I agree. When someone's saying Jordan Peterson is a Hitler or he has beliefs like that of a Hitler, like that's a massive misunderstanding. Calling everyone Hitler basically makes Hitler less bad. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and he deserves to be evil. Hitler deserves to be evil. He did horrible things, and we tend to like forget about it so quickly. But yeah, getting back to the
maybe propaganda, we could talk about the ideas.
I want to talk about the Platoon 101, the members of Platoon 101, because in some places of mass genocide in Poland specifically, the members of Platoon 101, if they seemed that they couldn't do the shootings, they were relieved. But in other places, they were not given that opportunity. So it was not like they did not have choice to stop the shooting and say no to what they were doing. They did have that choice, but it was not offered to them openly and explicitly as it was in some other places. So why do you think that happened?
Okay, so there was, I think the worst one, if I remember correctly, was Einsatzgruppen Group D, who were in Ukraine. And they committed, I believe they did 600,000, I might be wrong, out of the 2 million. So they did the most extremes. And the worst one was known as the massacre of Baba Yar. Ironically, this place was actually hit by a Russian missile a year or two ago. But it was a memorial. And it's a big ravine. So 2 cracks in the earth, like 2 rocks, big, deep pit. And you can guess what happened. People were shot into the pit. And in one day, they did 30,000. And I don't think people actually know the specific reason behind that. Because some of them, they were explicitly told that if you can't do it, you can say no. And I think the choice was to go back to the front lines, go to the front lines and fight in the war. And some of the people, they did leave and go, but some they did not. And in many cases, they were not even told that, okay, you can leave, basically. Because I think they were scared that if you say that to people, it was such a horrendous thing that many people would have left. Rather than doing what they kept on doing. I just want to build on what you're saying. So it's a sense of duty and a sense of responsibility. So their ideas, they believed that they needed to clear Eastern Europe. The Nazis believed they had to clear Eastern Europe of the Untermensch, the lesser humans like Nietzsche was talking about, so that they can have Lebensraum, living space, to build their empire, their 1,000-year empire is what they called it. And actually, if they were to back down from this, they would be considered a coward. And this is an idea that's linked to this book, Soldaten. Nietzsche says that the Wehrmacht respected professionalism much more than doing a good job. So if you were professional, you were perfect, basically. You were fine. And if you had received direct orders, you had to follow your orders professionally. And,
but then, do you think it was only orders, or do you think it was propaganda as well?
Well, I think propaganda was like their moral philosophy, but their moral philosophy was warped by 10 years of Nazism, 10 years of belief that they needed to kill the Untermensch of Europe. I
was watching some videos of the propaganda that they used to show to basically on television in Germany at the time, and basically you can see that they're saying, look at these people, they're living in these squalls, they're living in these slums, and they are dirty human beings, they are not as good as us, we do it in this way, they do it in this way, and they were just trying to dehumanize all the Jews and Romanis and Gypsies as well.
Yeah, it was awful stuff.
And then, so do you think many people who believed in that propaganda, they went on to do the atrocities that they did in the concentration camps and also outside the concentration camps?
I think there must be a direct link. There must be a direct correlation, but you don't know because you're not inside their mind, I suppose. You don't know why they did the things they did, but, I guess the Hitler Youth is a good example of what we're getting at. They were taught from a young age how to be a good Nazi, and then those people would have joined the Second World War proud, to have known an SS soldier or something like that.
Were they also the people who used to duel and get like scars in their face to show how masculine they are? And
I think so. And veterans, so First World War veterans. They wanted to show they'd been in war. And Hitler was also that man. He wanted people to know that he's normal and that he went to war and that he was injured,
no way he was normal. To talk about Goldhagen versus Browning. So what's the whole thing in there? Because there are 2 ideas in here.
Right. So this started in the 1990s, but it was based on going back to the late 70s, 80s, intentionalists versus functionalists. Functionalists believe that what happened because of the Sonderweg that I mentioned earlier and their friendship with Nazism, whereas the intentionalists believe it was completely a Nazi structure and everyone was a devout Nazi. Anyway, Goldhagen is of the belief everyone's a devout Nazi. And this book gained crazy popularity in the 1990s in Germany.
Okay.
Because the German people liked the idea that they were not responsible, but the Nazis were responsible, basically.
Okay.
And this was made by a guy who's been criticized by a lot of historians for his inaccuracy. He was born and raised in New York. His family were immigrants from Eastern Europe, Jewish immigrants.
Yep.
But anyway, Browning came back a few years later as a response, saying that they were not Nazis, but they were people, you know.
Okay.
The Nazis were people, basically.
Yeah.
That's what he came back at saying.
It was basically the book Ordinary Men explained itself. It was ordinary men who did all the atrocities that they did. It was not necessarily this mutated group of people who were completely fucked up in their head and all those kind of things. It was not necessarily that. They were messed up in their head, most of them who did this, but it was also normal people. It was you see in those movies as well, it was someone's wife, it was someone's husband, it was someone's father, and all those things. They had life outside of that as well, but then they did it, which kind of scares me, because it kind of shows that all human beings are capable of doing what happened. And we saw a bit of that in Khmer Rouge in Cambodia. In the killing fields of Cambodia, we saw that in there as well, and we have seen that in many other instances as well. And the more deeper you go into it, you feel like there is no hope for humanity we always have.
Do feel like I felt like that when I was to learn that Ordinary Men is not a popular book in Germany, and actually the Goldhagen's one is the more popular one. So they still to this day culturally, this was the 90s, so they probably revised it, because actually the Germans have done a good job at revising.
Oh yes.
At revising where they've done wrongs, basically.
And they do carry this huge burden of being called with various names.
I think the German culture as it stands is a bastion for cultures recovering from a past fascism, and they're doing so much. I think. Yeah. You know, if you're German and you're born and raised in Germany, I think you should be proud of what your family have recovered. Yeah, basically.
Yeah, not necessarily the proud of what the forefathers had to do, but basically
what your recent relatives have recovered.
Yeah, you know. Definitely. Yeah. So going more into talking about the propaganda, is there anything more that you want to add into it, or? No, there was one thing that I wanted to ask you, actually. Did people who were outside the concentration camps or outside the battalions and the police forces, did they know what was going on in the camps?
Well, what was a big rumour was that not a rumour, but open knowledge, open secret, you could say. The trains left the towns full, they came back empty. Yeah. Nobody knew where the people were going or what they were doing. The Jews who were pushed onto these trains believed that they were there for work. But I think the Germans, not the rest of Europe, they were aware that their country wanted to have a master race. Yeah. They were also big supporters of euthanasia, so they would kill disabled people in places like Dachau, which was the first death camp, and that really inspired the horrific Holocaust. But the people weren't that connected with it. It's like, I forget who said it, but we mentioned this before, the guy that said they came for so and so but I wasn't this, they came for the gays but I wasn't gay, they came for disabled but I wasn't disabled, they came for Jews but I wasn't Jewish,
I don't
something like that, and then they came for me. So you don't care until they come for you.
Yes. basically linking this to the recent day, like the world that we live in right now. There is this famous journalist in India. His name is Ravish Kumar. I really adore him. I'm not a blind follower of him or something, because there might be people, because I talked about BJP in a bad way a few minutes ago, so some people might be saying, oh, he's the anti-BJP. No, I couldn't care less about any of the politicians in that country, because I'm not from there. But he basically, the one thing that he says, which is which resonates with me quite a lot, is like, as long as you have the ability in every morning to send hi and good morning message in your WhatsApp to other people, don't worry, your freedom has not been taken away.
Wow.
And that is very deep.
That's until AI starts automatically sending you messages.
Yes, that could be that could be government taking over the things that you are doing in other way, or it could also be, I mean, as long as you have that freedom, you feel that you have a freedom. You feel like everything is normal as long as you have that. But then you don't realize slowly they're like creeping their way out, and they're taking your freedoms away, your rights away. You are suddenly being stopped by a policeman while going to a store to buy something, to check if the meat in your bag is that of a cow or that of a goat.
Wow. Yeah.
Like, just imagine there exists a world where people are being killed in the suspicion that they're eating meat of an animal that other people worship. Not even evidence, suspicion.
Yeah.
And imagine living in that kind of world.
Yeah, it's censorship and propaganda. Yeah,
and people basically, you will find people online, or you will find people like who have the platform saying that, oh yeah, I mean it's good, like you should not do that. They should not have disrespect the religion. Like, who the hell are you to talk about disrespecting God? God is bigger than all of us, apparently.
Can I just say, a democracy, it means that other people are allowed to say things that you don't like to hear.
Exactly.
If you walked around and you only heard people say things that you wanted to hear, you would be living in an oppressed... You would not only be unable to make opinions, but you would be trapped within yourself, because everyone else is doing the same as you. How boring is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is... It is sad things. Yeah. It is. It's a bit of if you are an optimist, it's a very sad time to live. If you're a pessimist, I think pessimist would be kind of enjoying the situation that's going on, the things that are going on right now. So to go back into the ordinary people, I have a few more questions to ask you. Yeah. One is, were the police who were given the assignment to collect the Jewish people and load them into the death trains, do the atrocities that they did on concentration camps, did they ever back down from doing those things, or did they ever say no to do this?
Obviously, there would have been people saying no, and then they would have been shot instantly.
Yeah.
But based on the research I did in my dissertation, there were multiple accounts of people allowed access into anywhere. They followed their own rules. And the reason why they followed their own rules is because they were related to someone powerful, or because they had influence. So it was the Nazis was like extremely intense, like everything was power based and everything was emotionless. So if you didn't want to do something and you had power, you didn't have to do it.
Yeah. And they tactfully surrendered in D-Day, didn't they? On D-Day.
So on D-Day 1944, this was when you saw the surrenders happening on a large scale. Because after 1944, Hitler survived a bomb plot, assassination attempt, and even though he wasn't physically injured, he became erratic, and he was paranoid of every single person in the military. He'd rarely smile. He had a tremor. He would take a lot of drugs and stuff. So people were scared, petrified of Hitler. So these people on the front line, watching the Americans, Canadians, British, Allied forces enter the beach, they just surrendered straight away, because they were saying to their comrades, "We've got families, go back to your wife, go back to your children." And there were quite a few accounts of some really brave men who, despite being told you're going to get shot in the head because you're not following orders, they disagreed. And they managed to get their whole platoon to surrender. And you might say they're a coward for surrendering, but they protected their and the families got to see them again.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Now, talking about the depiction of what happened in World War II and the ordinary men and the people outside the camps, how they acted, how they were living their life, we mostly see that people didn't know. And like also, have you watched the series called Band of Brothers?
No.
So in that series, in one of the last episodes, when they finally reach the concentration camps, everyone is shocked and horrified of seeing the situation that they are in, which tells that like people at that time outside of concentration camps even, or outside of the places where those things were going on, they didn't know what was going on in concentration camps, which is surprising because, well, I mean, at this day and age, we have social media, we have this, we have that, but back in the days, they certainly did not have those things. But one would think that people would know outside like what was going on.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the end of the Holocaust and when everything was over for the Nazis, there were mixed reactions to what happened. The British had suspicion based on spies that the Germans had a concentration camp. They were horrified when they saw it. The Americans wanted to give so much food, but they obviously couldn't give them food. They'd die. The Soviets, if they found any Nazis, they put them in the Jewish concentration camp.
Okay.
Yeah. So they actually used... They were horrific. What the Soviets did in Europe was horrific. They were monstrous to the European people and the Germans especially.
But do you think those people who were put into the concentration, like, the soldiers and the Nazis who were put into the concentration camp, did they deserve it?
It's a tough one.
Yeah,
I think this is why people still don't understand Russia and still have problems with Russia. It's because they do these things like that. Like they're gonna retaliate. They're gonna get revenge, and do you always need to get revenge? Maybe not.
Well, in that kind of situation, I would kind of believe that they did deserve it.
But actually,
otherwise, what kind of punishment would be like a just punishment to people who did that? Like, what would be a just punishment to Himmler or to Hitler?
Well, they had the trials. They had the Nuremberg trials, first ever international trials. The Americans, well, this is what we learn at school, but the Allied forces, they wanted to not destroy Germany because that happened in the First World War, and that's why they came back at them. This is also why West Germany is so much more diverse and also richer than East Germany, which still has ties to fascism, because they felt so downtrodden by the communists.
Okay.
So it's not always appropriate to get revenge.
Yeah.
But
well, I mean, revenge is something, but like just punishment, saying,
just punishment,
talking about
definitely.
what is a just punishment to I don't think killing alone death alone justifies the... I mean, there should be more than that. Well, I'm not saying like, go and kill I'm not... I don't have the cynical opinion of saying, okay, everyone who does a crime should be killed. I don't believe that. There are certain crimes different. That the crimes are different.
Well, it's
and
hard,
all those
it's
things,
hard
but
to judge when a group have done some horrific things. It's hard to judge the individual, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Anyway.
All right. I think...
should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think we have talked enough about the ordinary men.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we have talked enough about the ordinary men, and I think we're going to talk about the ZeroHourThoughts into that camera over there.
Yeah.
And then we'll go on to from there. So do you have any ZeroHourThoughts for today?
I had some earlier, but it's No,
not for today. Well, I mean, I don't...
I'd like to hear yours.
I've got few.
I'd like to hear one.
It doesn't really relate...
I've got to get the bus.
Yeah, it doesn't really relate with what we're talking about, but I wanted to say this because I want to lighten our mood a bit. So there are many people out there who don't even know who they are, and I don't blame them for it. Ever since we were born, we're modified time and again to form a shape of our morals and our principles, our philosophy, our view of the world and the people that live in it. To really know who they really are, people during their early 20s should live completely alone for a few days without any form of contact with the outside world and the fabricated pieces that occupy it. Then you will truly learn who you are, what you think of yourself, what others think of yourself, what makes you happy, sad, motivated, comfortable, uncomfortable. It will also help you figure out what it is that you really want in your life. It is sad that we meet people who never settle on one thing. They are always in a run to find who they really are. And when all they have to do is to stop running, close the doors, stay with yourself and hear your own thoughts. people, please hear your own thoughts. It's more important than hearing any music that you always put on, headphones whenever you walk outside your room. Yeah, I think it's important for us to know who we are.
This is great. It's like a sense of awareness and appreciation for everyday life.
Yeah.
And I think it's important because one day at a time.
Yeah, one day at a time. Yeah, look, let's learn about ourselves, then go out and figure out what the world is doing, what the world is saying, what the world is thinking.
Yeah.
Because first of all, you need to know who you are. Like,
Definitely.
we get molded. We hear the like Joe Rogan, and we completely believe in whatever the hell he says. We then go and listen to Jordan Peterson. We completely believe whatever the hell he says. Like, our mind is completely being occupied by someone else's ideas and not by ours.
Right. Yeah. So grow. You're basically saying grow your ideas.
Yeah, exactly. Figure out who you are.
But
I think the best way to do it is solitary.
Yeah. Well, I think you're saying solitary because if you want to grow your own ideas, you can't do it in an environment that's telling you how to grow it.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you can avoid censorship. Really.
Yeah.
That's what you're expressing.
Yeah. Like people need to figure out who they are before they go and talk about other people, before they go and comment about other people. Because what if someone else comes and, okay, what do you believe in? And you say you utter something that you think you believe in, but it is actually what you heard.
I suppose you could say if you're going to judge other people, you have to have judged yourself first. You know? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. All right, we'll wrap it up now.
Yeah.
And then it was a bit of a difficult conversation that we had today.
It wasn't all positive.
Yeah, definitely not.
Hopefully it was interesting for you. Yeah.
And hopefully this Zero Thought will help you do some self-reflection as well, as it kind of helps us to do that from time to time. We will be back with similar kind of topics in the future, and the next one we will do on philosophy. Hopefully.
Exciting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jamie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you. It was great.
No worries. We'll see you next time.